A recurring tension in contemporary epistemology concerns how we should treat intuitions, or seemings, as sources of evidence. Some theories, especially phenomenal conservatism, adopt a very liberal stance. Every seeming is evidence, and evidence always increases justification. Other views resist this, holding that once a belief is already maximally justified, additional intuitions become evidentially inert. This disagreement becomes especially vivid in mundane perceptual cases, where a confidence is already extremely high. If I look at a cup on the table, and it seems to me that the cup is there, does a second or third seeming meaningfully raise the probability that the cup is there? Or is the evidential work already done? The answer to this question reveals a deeper philosophical divide about whether evidence can be infinitely counted and whether justification can grow without limit, even when no new information is introduced. Main explanation. On the intuitive, common sense picture, evidence saturates. Once a belief is overwhelmingly justified, once the probability is effectively won, additional intuitions do not add anything. They do not raise the probability further, because the perceptual system has already delivered all the information it can. If I continue staring at the cup, the persistence of the perceptual state does not generate new evidence. It merely reflects the stability of the same underlying sensory input. This view treats justification as tied to information, not to the number of times the same information is phenomenally presented. It aligns with Bayesian reasoning, where probability increases only when new, independent evidence is introduced. Phenomenal conservatism, particularly in Huemer's formulation, takes a different approach. It treats every seeming as evidence, and evidence as something that always increases justification, even if only by an infinitesimal amount. If it seems to you that the cup is on the table, that is evidence. If it seems to you again a moment later, that is more evidence. Even if the probability is already 0.999999, the new seeming nudges it slightly higher. This creates a picture in which evidence never becomes inert and justification can grow indefinitely. The theory gains elegance through its uniform rule, every seeming counts, but at the cost of implying that a single perceptual moment could generate an unbounded amount of evidence simply by containing many microseemings. The deeper problem is that phenomenal conservatism treats these microseemings as if they were independent evidential contributions, when in fact they are all produced by the same causal process. They do not introduce new information, they merely reflect the persistence of the same informational state. From a Bayesian standpoint, this looks like double accounting, or even infinite accounting, the same data. Many epistemologists find this counterintuitive because it divorces justification from informational content and ties it instead to the mere repetition of a phenomenological state. The debate ultimately turns on whether epistemic justification should track information or phenomenology. Huemer's view offers a clean, uniform rule that avoids messy exceptions, but it does so by allowing evidence to accumulate indefinitely, even when no new information is present. The alternative view preserves our intuitive sense that justification saturates once the evidential ceiling is reached, preventing the infinite counting of redundant seemings. This tension exposes a fundamental question for any theory of evidence. Should justification grow simply because a seeming persists, or only when new information enters the picture? How one answers that question shapes the entire architecture of one's epistemology. If our intuitive judgment is that infinite evidence or endlessly accumulating seemings is itself counterintuitive, then phenomenal conservatism faces a foundational challenge. The view depends on the idea that every seeming contributes some positive justification, no matter how small. But if a theoretical intuitions tell us that redundant seemings should become evidentially inert, that justification should saturate once all available information is already in play, then the core motivation for phenomenal conservatism weakens. The theory risks losing its intuitive grounding precisely at the point where it claims to be most natural, the idea that seemings are straightforward sources of evidence. If the phenomenology of seeming does not match the phenomenology of evidence, the entire framework struggles to get off the ground. A number of contemporary critiques of phenomenal conservatism sharpen this exact worry and use it as a basis for rejecting the view outright. Many recent papers argue that if our intuitive reaction is that infinite seemings or endlessly accumulating microintuitions are not genuine evidence, then phenomenal conservatism loses its primary selling point, its supposed fit with common sense. Authors like Siegel, Markey, Tucker, in his Critical Moments, and McGrath press the point that phenomenal conservatism overgenerates justification by treating phenomenology as evidentially potent, even when no new information is present. Others argue that the view collapses into a form of epistemic inflation, where justification expands simply because a mental state persists, not because the world provides additional support. These critiques converge on a single pressure point. If a theoretical intuitions tell us that redundant seemings should be evidentially inert, then phenomenal conservatism is not merely counterintuitive at the margins, it fails at its foundational promise to capture the natural structure of justification. In this light, the theory struggles to get off the ground because the very phenomenology it appeals to does not behave the way the theory requires. Despite the objections, phenomenal conservatism retains several important strengths that keep it alive in contemporary epistemology. First, it offers an exceptionally simple and unified account of justification. If something seems true, that gives you prima facie justification to believe it. This avoids the need for complex internal mechanisms, regressistipas, or special epistemic faculties. Second, Huemer argues that the view captures the phenomenology of ordinary reasoning better than its competitors. People do not typically infer their way into basic beliefs. They simply find themselves with seemings that guide their judgments. Third, Huemer responds to the infinite evidence objection by insisting that the theory is not committed to independent evidential increments. He allows that multiple seemings may be causally connected or derivative, and thus their justificatory force can be discounted or overridden. What matters is not the literal number of microseemings, but the fact that seemings, as a class, are the most basic and natural sources of justification we have. In this way, Huemer maintains that phenomenal conservatism remains intuitive at the structural level, even if some of its implications, like the possibility of accumulating redundant evidence, strike us as counterintuitive.